The rain fell steadily on the empty street, each drop catching the warm glow of the streetlights like tiny diamonds. The pavement shimmered with reflections of the city lights, creating a mirror world beneath the feet of anyone brave enough to venture out on such a night. Most people had found shelter hours ago, leaving the streets to belong to the rain and the occasional car that whispered past with its headlights cutting through the darkness. Sarah knelt on the wet pavement, her white dress soaked through and clinging to her skin. The expensive fabric, once pristine and carefully chosen, now absorbed the dirty rainwater without complaint. She didn't seem to notice or care. Her blonde hair hung in damp strands around her face as she stared down at the small object in her hands. The rain continued its gentle assault, but she remained perfectly still, as if the world had stopped moving around her. Behind her, a sleek black car sat parked at the curb, its engine running quietly. The soft purr of the expensive machine seemed almost apologetic in the silence of the night. Steam rose gently from its hood where the rain met the warm metal, creating small clouds that disappeared as quickly as they formed. The car's headlights cast long beams down the empty street, illuminating the rain like a curtain of silver threads. Michael stepped out of the driver's seat, his polished shoes clicking against the wet asphalt. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if he was afraid that any sudden movement might shatter something fragile in the air between them. His dark suit was perfectly tailored, the kind of clothing that spoke of success and careful planning. But tonight, none of that seemed to matter. He closed the car door softly behind him, the sound barely audible over the steady rhythm of the rain. He had been driving for hours, searching the city streets with a growing sense of panic that he tried to keep hidden beneath his calm exterior. When he finally spotted her kneeling in the rain, his heart had stopped for a moment. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by a deeper worry. This wasn't like Sarah. She was always so composed, so in control of every situation. Seeing her like this, vulnerable and lost, made something ache in his chest. Sarah didn't look up when she heard his footsteps approaching. She knew it was him without having to see his face. After 3 years together, she could recognize the sound of his walk, the particular way his shoes met the ground. She had always found comfort in that sound before. Tonight, it only made the weight in her chest feel heavier. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice barely rising above the sound of the rain. He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough to help if she needed it, far enough to give her space. "I've been looking for you." She finally raised her head to look at him. Her makeup had long since been washed away by the rain, leaving her face clean and raw with emotion. In her hands, she held a small velvet box, the one he had given her just hours earlier. The same box that was supposed to contain their future together. "I can't," she whispered, her voice catching on the words. "I thought I could, but I can't." Michael felt his carefully constructed world begin to shift beneath his feet. He had planned everything so perfectly. The restaurant had been her favorite, the ring had been chosen after weeks of careful consideration, and the proposal had been rehearsed in his mind 100 times. He had been so certain of her answer that he had already started planning their wedding in his head during the drive to dinner. "What changed?" he asked, though part of him was afraid to hear the answer. Sarah looked down at the box in her hands again. The ring inside was beautiful. Exactly the kind of thing she had always said she wanted. But when he had gotten down on one knee in the restaurant, surrounded by other diners who had stopped their conversations to watch, she had felt something cold and heavy settle in her stomach instead of the joy she had expected. "Nothing changed," she said quietly. "That's the problem." The rain continued to fall around them, creating a private world where only they existed. Michael took a small step closer, his expensive shoes now soaked through. He didn't care about the suit or the rain or anything else except understanding what was happening between them. "I don't understand," he said, and she could hear the genuine confusion in his voice. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the rain on her face like tears she couldn't cry. "Do you remember when we first met?" she asked. "You were so different then. You laughed more. You talked about dreams that had nothing to do with money or success or impressing other people." Michael remembered. He had been working as a junior architect then, full of ideas about designing buildings that would change the world. He had talked for hours about sustainable housing and community spaces that would bring people together. Sarah had listened with shining eyes, believing in his vision as much as he did. "I grew up," he said simply. "We both did." "No," Sarah shook her head. "You became someone else. Someone who drives a car that costs more than most people make in a year. Someone who proposes in expensive restaurants because it's what's expected, not because it means something." The words hit him like physical blows, but he couldn't argue with them. Somewhere along the way, he had started measuring his worth by his bank account and his address. The dreams he had shared with Sarah had been quietly put away, labeled as childish fantasies that successful men didn't indulge in. "I did it for us," he said, though the words sounded hollow even to him. "I wanted to be able to give you everything. But what if I didn't want everything?" Sarah asked, finally standing up. The rain had made her dress nearly transparent, but she seemed unaware of anything except the conversation between them. "What if I just wanted you?" Michael stared at her, really seeing her for the first time in months. When had he stopped noticing the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her work at the animal shelter? When had he started scheduling their dates around business dinners and networking events instead of the long walks they used to take through the park? "The ring," Sarah continued, holding out the small box to him, "it's beautiful. It's probably worth more than I make in 6 months. But when you gave it to me, all I could think about was how it felt like a transaction. Like you were buying a wife instead of asking someone you love to share your life." The truth of her words cut deeper than any anger could have. Michael realized that he had been treating their relationship like another business deal, something to be managed and optimized rather than nurtured and cherished. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "I didn't realize." "I know you didn't," Sarah said gently. "That's what makes it so sad." They stood in the rain for a long moment, both of them getting thoroughly soaked. The city continued its quiet hum around them, but neither of them paid attention to anything except each other. "What do we do now?" Michael asked finally. Sarah looked at the ring box one more time before setting it gently on the hood of his car. "I think," she said slowly, "you need to figure out who you really want to be. And I need to figure out if I can love that person." Michael nodded, understanding that this wasn't really an ending but a pause. A chance for both of them to step back and look at what they had built together, and what they wanted to build in the future. "Can I drive you home?" he asked. Sarah smiled for the first time that evening, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I think I'd rather walk. The rain feels good." Michael watched her go, her white dress glowing in the streetlights as she disappeared around the corner. He stood there for several more minutes, letting the rain soak through his expensive suit. Then he picked up the ring box from the hood of his car and got back inside. As he drove home through the empty streets, he found himself thinking not about the money he had spent on the ring, or the embarrassment of a failed proposal, but about the woman he had fallen in love with 3 years ago. The woman who rescued stray dogs and cried at movies and believed that he could change the world with his designs. Maybe it wasn't too late to become that man again. Maybe some things were worth more than money after all. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean and preparing it for whatever tomorrow might bring.